All right, we are live. Welcome to the Rogue 1.5 episode, season 3. I'm your host, Adam Weig, owner of the Spliff Fiddles. With me is Mr. Daniel Height, owner
Hello.
of the Splicers. We'll get into the Splicers name more precisely later. And with us is everyone's favorite guest, Mr. Phil, owner of the Keep Show. How you doing, Phil?
Doing good.
All
Thank you
right.
for having me.
You're welcome. As of right now, everyone is tied for last place and clawing our way to the top. So I figured we'll start with just a little bit of bookkeeping. I think the Splicers wanted to give us a little bit of a name history lesson. So Height, you want to take it away?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the great things about getting to do these rogue podcasts is actually getting a chance to respond to some of the, I don't know, say baseless or factless complaints that get thrown about on the
Lusky facts.
alternative facts that get thrown about. Where when we're listening, it's people want to respond, and so I'm glad to have this forum to be able to respond. One of them that I took a kind of special offense to was the name of the Splicers, where I think Lusky had mentioned in the last podcast that he kind of threw off that it was based off of 1 year of a name. In fact, there was a little bit more history to that, so I just wanted to take a minute to explain it. There were 2 seasons, so the original Splicers were back in, I want to say, like 2004, 2005. I had actually quit fantasy basketball. I was done with it to focus, on baseball primarily. And Horn was traveling either in like New Zealand or like South Dakota or something weird.
New Zealand sounds right. I remember
2004. That's post Bush, right?
Yes. No, second Bush, right?
Yeah.
So he wanted to do a draft, and he got me to basically co-own the team with him. And I was doing the auction in person in New York. It was one of the early New York drafts. And so we had to come up with a name. We had a running joke in college, us not being very technical. Anytime we had to do anything technical, we just kind of joked that we would just splice something together. I don't know, kind of dumb, but it was just kind of an ongoing joke. So that was the Splicers. And then I don't know if you guys realize this, but Horn and I have the same initials, which you can look up if you want, but it is in fact true. And that was where the DH Splicers came from. Fast forward to obviously 2012 when I had Asher, and I knew I was going to miss the draft, and so Jones and I, Jones did the draft, and then we managed the team together. So I brought back the name the Splicers since we were managing the team together, and obviously dropped the DH since his initials are not in fact DH. So that was it.
So what was your team name in between 2004 and then when you brought back, or before you brought back the Splicers name? You were the Gay team?
Yeah, I was the Gay team. So I drafted Gay like the first year of the keeper of the modern era. Drafted Gay, won the league that year, kept Gay, I think, for like 3 years or something.
That's right.
That's right. So named it around Gay, but.
Well, they also, I think, took issue with your bandwagon logo. Do you have any defense of that?
Yeah, so we did. I mean, me and Paskin had some, I would say, creative challenges in trying to come up with a logo for the Splicers. I was fine going kind of geographical. I don't have an NBA team, so it was fine having it local. And there is some nod to like splicing 2 things together within the logo. And I feel like my son and my daughter are going to become huge Warriors fans in a few years, and so I have no problem tying it to the geography.
So you've never had an NBA team?
No, I've never had an NBA team.
Because you were like just UConn growing up?
I was UConn growing up. My family didn't follow NBA, so I was a free agent.
Excellent. Well, that's beautiful, and this is exactly why we do this pod. So, speaking of disagreements, I don't want to get too deep into it. I don't think Lusky did either, but I think there was a little bit of something they touched on the last pod, which is the trade negotiations going on between Phil, you, and Lusky. Do you want to kind of illuminate your side of things with that? Because he kind of just said the stuff you're throwing his way isn't any good. I felt like.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't think that's uncommon. Like I throw shitty offers out there all the time, so whatever. I don't necessarily really take offense to that comment. It's more just kind of in general. I feel like in the off season, right? Nobody wants to move. No one wants to do anything. And even though we've had this like 2.5 weeks of summer league and it feels great to kind of have some sort of content or whatever the case is, we don't get any trades done until like just a week before the actual draft. Like nothing happens during the offseason. So I think to me, it's more, the fact that I've thrown out a formal offer, whether or not it be good or whether or not it's good. I'm throwing out a formal offer simply to try and gauge, where he is and attempt to get a counter offer. And so I guess to me, it's more, rather than saying that my offer is shitty, why don't you provide a counter, and let me know where it stands in your head, or kind of what assessments you've done in terms of, where you think a reasonable, negotiation would start from your perspective, right? So, and I think we've been discussing offers as well, right? And I think we've probably gotten the closest of anyone that I've discussed offers with, in the off season, right? I mean, I think at most we're probably, a few dollars apart, and it's more your mindset is more, do I want to do this deal now, because if I do it, then you're in a position where you're potentially losing out on something that could change in value, right? So and
Right.
so
There is a do you guys find this early in the off season there's kind of like this interesting trade landscape where nobody really wants to move, like you said. So you're kind of like, and I think a lot of people haven't really done their due diligence yet, so they don't really feel comfortable putting prices on things, or so it's weird. It's a much different dance than closer to the draft in terms of a negotiation,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I'd say, I mean, I've gotten a few offers, and yes, like without having done the research or analysis yet, like so early, I'm much less willing to go for quote reasonable offer, and I would charge more now than I will as the draft gets closer, if that makes
Right.
sense. Like knowingly, I know, like to take the obvious example is the price of a slot, right? Early on, it's going to be a lot because people don't. There's just less known about the market. There's a lot of people have hypotheses, I'd say, about what the keeper market's going to be like in the slot market.
Mm-hmm.
But this early, like I'm just not going to sell one for the sake of selling one. It would have to be like a big offer.
yeah, I mean, no one wants to get picked off, right? No one wants to sell a stock for X price and then find out that they're actually worth $20 or whatever the case is, and I doubt that that's a realistic price, but at the end of the day, no one wants to get picked off, right? People only want, they'll only do something if it's a take, to do it now offer that's so far in their favor in terms of their mindsets that that it makes sense to do it. So.
Phil, do you think there's truth kind of to like the first deal that happens for us using the slot example still like sets the market in a way for what's to come?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, it does. I think every deal kind of, especially when you were looking at the arms race, right, it kind of sets the market for, what's going to happen next, because it gives everyone this, comparison or relative, relative value that they can base their trades off of. So I certainly think it does. The stock market, I think, ends up being a little bit different, just because, year to year it changes so much, right? The number of players under contract change every single year. The number of throwbacks based on previous year's performance always changes. And I think what we've seen from like the league transitioning perspective, we don't have a lot of $0 guys anymore, because everyone going to the draft, wants to hit on that rookie or second year or third year player, and so those guys are all going for $5 to $25, like the TJ Warrens and the Otto Porters of last year, effectively.
That's how
So we
T-Mac,
don't have a lot of $0 guys.
which is how T-Mac does his thing by swooping in and getting all the great value players. And ending up fourth every year.
Right. Last year was interesting too. Even more, I think those guys went for a lot more than in my short history here, or even in what I anticipated. Probably. So I think that's a nice segue actually to the beef of what the Collier pod was talking about, which is a lot of UAF BDL. So I think one of the reasons we wanted to do this pod, and there was a bit of a clamor to extend the previous pod that they did, is there's a lot of topics I think you could just really delve into. I think they even said themselves we could spend this whole time talking about the UAF BDL. So with that, how do you guys kind of feel the impact on player prices this will have based on what you've seen so far?
So I mean, I have not been quiet about the fact that I'm not a fan of UFBDL. I mean, I think it's great that it adds this new dynamic, but I just don't like it simply because of the randomness that it created. The valuation that they were talking about, I think, statistically, if you do look back, there are very few of these rookies that will actually end up contributing on rosters. Lonzo Ball and Dennis Smith may end up being exceptions, but the concerns with those guys are always going to be efficiency. And so, is it likely that they'll finish as top 50 players? It's actually probably less likely than there's probably less than a 50-50 chance in reality, just because of the talent that's kind of in the NBA. Dennis Smith Jr. and Lonzo Ball are playing in the Western Conference. I mean, every night they're going to be going up against, some of the best guards in the NBA. Like, and they're playing, 4 games against each of these teams. When historically, they've played 30 games a season in their careers. Right now, they're playing an 82-game season. They're going to get run into the ground. So, I mean, the likelihood that they will be top 50 players is probably not high. But right, there's so much hype around them that we've kind of artificially created this value that they could either get sold for $50 to $70, and honestly, if Gabe has an offer on the table for like $50 for Dennis Smith, I mean, and he's planning on competing this year, I don't fault him for not taking it, but it's something that he should probably consider.
Yeah, that's a crazy scenario there, because I don't know. Even I remember, when Towns, I think the prevailing sentiment immediately following that draft was that $80 was insane for him, right? Like, and that was, I don't think we can really compare Dennis Smith Jr. to Towns at this point preseason as a rookie. Do you?
No, I mean Smith Jr.'s kind of trajectory right now, and as well as Donovan Mitchell, reminds me a little bit of Lillard. The year Lillard came in as a rookie, played very well in summer league. Had good talent and was going to be put in a position where they were going to be the starter. They were being handed kind of the reins of the offense, for a rebuilding team. I guess Lillard wasn't really a rebuilding team because they had LMA and Batum. But that's kind of what it reminds me of. And Lillard went for 40 that year and ended up being a 3-year keeper. So,
Yeah. I mean, what I'm interested in is this year there's one thing, right, where we have, 8 guys that are already, and like every single one will essentially be capped on their rookie contract. But 6 guys are either coming out next year, or in the case of like Zion Williamson, in a few years. But next year, right, we're going to do the draft again, and there's going to be even more guys. So like in year 2 and year 3 of this experiment, it's going to be more and more. We're coming into, the draft in 2 years. It could be the top 14 guys are all gone, right? Not available. And then you might have a situation where like Miles Turner was picked, what was like 12th pick overall or something in real life. And he would have been a huge savings, right? He would have been kept for like 15 and 25, which would have been kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, because there was all that preseason hype on Turner, and if he had been a UAF BDL pick, he certainly would have been kept for the $5. Yeah, so
Yeah, that's interesting. Are are a lot of these guys also going to be similar to like year two breakout guys, and so these guys are going to be compelled to put them on long contracts that might decrease those guys going into the next draft too, as well, right? Kind of like 2-3 years out.
Yeah, I mean it's still cheap, right? I have like Monk, like Smith Smith's gonna be 5, Monk's gonna be 5, which means like 15 next year is still pretty cheap,
yeah,
right?
that's true.
15 and 25. I mean, you do get them for a year less. You don't. In the past, if you drafted one of these rookies and hit, you then get them for 3 more years. So it's a 4-year total. Now it's only 3-year total.
Yeah, you're
Right.
certainly decreasing the overall value that is kind of in the potential value in some of these contracts. But at the same time, it's effectively a free option. So you drafted a guy and you basically have a free option on him now for the next 3 years.
Right.
And what I didn't like it was just kind of the randomness of all of it. I like having information before I make a decision, and you can make the counter argument that that's what was so great about it, because who knew Dennis Smith Jr. is going to end up on the Mavs and be a $50 player. Horn's argument has always been, oh, the value will be set during the offseason and there's just going to be so much negotiation and money's going to start flinging around, and that's so much better than 5 minutes at the auction, bidding up a guy that'll go for $20 or $25. And I guess we're not really seeing that, right? I mean, we've just discussed 10 minutes ago that no one does any deals in the offseason, right?
Yeah, and especially for these guys, right? Like I'm holding on to Monk. Like there isn't a small dollar amount that's going to get excite me to trade him. I'd rather hold on to that chip and like see it's a lottery ticket essentially, right?
Yeah.
I'd rather see it pan out, unless it's like a huge offer. There's really not much that would, like a few dollars here or there isn't going to do much.
Yeah,
I do like that. Yeah. I do like that. It didn't make it, it does make it interesting. It makes for interesting discussions. But yeah, I mean, not much deals are happening, at least in the off season. Like some deals were made during last year. Some deals I'm sure are going to be made this year for future picks. But yeah,
I mean, Monk is
at the auction,
1.25% of your baseline budget, right? The top pick, Markelle Fultz, is less than 10% of Peskin's baseline budget. Like this is just not expensive, right? It's not an expensive lottery ticket. It's just, I can't see a world where one of these guys exchanges hands for less than $50 to $75. And that's crazy to me, because it's just this artificial value that's been created. It's kind of insane to me.
Right, where he would be, let's say Monk would have been drafted for like $20, $30 or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's an argument to be made that the auction of Monk and Fultz would be more interesting than what's happening now.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I really am sad I'm on the wrong end of this whole thing with Dennis Smith Jr. trade, because my thought process going into that was kind of exactly what Phil's describing, which is the whole randomness of luck and so on. I was looking at going, well, here's this guy, he's small and maybe maybe could be something, maybe not, but what are the odds he's going to fall to a place where he can be a starter right away? And then even if I did have him, if he goes high in the draft, I was expecting to go a little higher than what he did. I'm gonna have to pay for him, and I thought I'll take the better flyer of someone who I know who's already got a chance, and by the way is going to start next year on an NBA team, and take my $5 or whatever it was, and that completely backfired, because mine was the lottery ticket that hit.
Well, yeah, I mean, know that it hit. Like he might not do anything this year.
Yeah, that's true too. I think Lusky kind of hinted at that being his sentiment, is like, we're getting all fired up about all these guys, but the reality is they all might be terrible.
Right. Towns is the exception.
Yeah, and you, I mean, you didn't know going into it, you had no clue that it would have been Dennis Smith going to Dallas, right? I mean, Dennis Smith could have gotten selected by Orlando, and then there would have been a timeshare between they would have been figuring out Peyton or Dennis Smith and who's better, or he could have gotten selected, third overall by Boston or whatever the case is, right? It just so happened that he went to a team without a starting point guard.
Yeah, I kind of wish now in retrospect the right move probably would have been waiting to see where he fell before making sort of move. But I kind of was I think that was the mistake. The rest of the reasoning was sound, and I would do it again that way. I just should have waited to see where he fell. Alas, yeah, it's all. I think we're going to be arguing both ways for the next couple of years.
Yeah, no, I mean, what I'll say is, like, kudos to Gabe, because did he get Ayton also? Does he have the rights to Ayton, Porter, and Dennis Smith Jr.? Or who has the rights to DeAndre Ayton?
Yes, Gabe has,
away, right?
Gabe has Ayton and Porter.
Yeah. So I mean, kudos to him for effectively getting his hands on 3 lottery tickets, right? Like he may ultimately be going into next year with Ayton and Porter, who could be 1 and 2, right? So kudos to him to kind of seeing that foresight, taking advantage of, to a certain extent of Horn, because Horn was competing and he knew Ayton was a chip. In hindsight, I don't think he would have done anything differently. But Gabe certainly was able to take advantage of that.
Right. Good point. So, all right, moving on to other. I mean, we could talk about that all day. I don't really want to, because I'm still a little butthurt about Dennis Smith. So, another interesting thing that came up, I was hoping they would touch on in the pod, but that's what we're here for, is the most recent rules changes. So the first was the no minimum number of drafted players. And I think that's also a very interesting one. So what are your guys' thoughts on that? What kind of impact?
I would say this is pretty not controversial. I think there was some sentiment maybe from like a bookbinder that that means that Harden could go for like $399. But the reality is he could have gone for $387 in the previous model, and that didn't happen. So it's not really a big difference. It just makes sense. Like I think we put in 12 as like an artificial floor to start when we went down from 16, just to see what would happen, and nothing like terrible happened. So I think it should be interesting to see like what happens if people, how few like we end up if there are a few people who draft like 8 or 9, or if everybody ends up getting in the 12 range anyway.
Predictions? Is anyone go low?
Based on what I did I think I drafted 12 last year. I think I drafted the minimum last year. But I regret it, right? Like I would love for multiple managers to make the decision that they were only going to draft like 8 guys or whatever the case is, because that basically just opens up all the $1 players at the end when it becomes a snake draft, for you to kind of fill out your 16-team roster. If you look at the guys that were picked up off the waiver wires, they were like, guys who contributed to teams that were picked up off the waiver wire, right after the draft happened, right?
I'm going to imagine that there's going to be some managers who don't realize how many people they're drafting too, and just end up running out of money at like the 7 or 8 range, which will be funny when that happens. Not to name names, but I'm sure it's going to happen.
I don't want to give away too much at T-Mac's data model, but I think he has some interesting, there's a big smoothing of the curve, I think, that happens later on amongst players, where those guys that are going for $5, $10, even $15 really aren't that much better in value than the guys that are in the $1 snake draft at the end.
Yeah.
So if you can extend it even more, it gets exciting for the likes of T-Mac, the scrapers at the end, the vultures.
Yeah. I mean, you could argue that they're actually less valuable because their keeper price tags end up being higher. So you'd actually rather participate rather than spending a bulk of your budget on those $5 and $10 guys. You might be better off saving the last 6 roster spots for $1 players, and just kind of taking those lottery tickets on guys that might luck into roles via injury or via Buddy Hield sucking dick,
that's hard. Like, that's true, but also hard. I think every single year I've had a few guys on the end of my squad who I thought, yeah, I'm going to see how they do. And one in particular kills me because I was excited about him coming into the draft. I drafted him, Devin Booker, and then I think it was like 3 weeks in, I decided he was just eating up a roster spot, no good, and I dropped him. And I think it was Gabe who picked him back up and held on him the rest of the way. And now look, it's like,
yeah, I mean that's actually a good counter argument that you bring up because you tend to give the guys who you spent $5 to $7 on a longer leash than the guys you spent $1 on, and more often than not that ends up being a huge mistake. I dropped Jokic after like even though I spent $2 for him, but he was like my tail end pick, and I ended up dropping him, and Bookbinder jumped on it and basically held him for the rest of the season, and so shit happens.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the next new rule was no 4-16 team rosters in the offseason.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like that little nuance that everybody liked that now goes away, right?
Well, I don't know that everybody liked it, considering that anytime an off-season deal was made, I had to remind people that you have to send somebody back. So I like the fact that it goes away since I don't have to send those harassing emails anymore. Horn, I think, was the only one who liked that nuance.
As he didn't send someone back until Phil strong-armed him.
Also very not a controversial change, I don't think. Adding some rows in the spreadsheet to be able to track this.
Yeah,
I mean, I think I'll actually agree with Horn on this because I think there is some gamesmanship there used to be some gamesmanship on the guy you sent back, right? Like you could try and be sneaky and be like, oh, why don't you give me back that guy who's not under contract and who as a potential flyer, and so you're getting that coin flip, that 0.5 of extra value.
You can still ask for it back. It's just
that's fair. That's true. You can still ask for it back.
It's not a forced thing where oh, you have to give me something back. Why don't you just give me this guy?
Yeah.
But I'm fairly certain that none of those guys have panned out or been kept.
You're probably right about that.
Yeah, we like it for all the wrong. We think it matters, but it doesn't. That's the beauty of this league is all of us agonize and love these things that in the end just don't make no difference at all. Yeah, I can't tell you how many long Slack conversations I've had haggling over $1 one way or another, and in the end, that shit don't matter.
It's true.
I think it was it Horn? I think it was Horn that said to me, "This is how you know it's a good trade, that you've been squeezing each other for $1 for the last hour and nobody feels good about it, but you're going to make the deal." All right, so the next one is toppers are finally permanent after much to do, I think, before that went into place. I assume you guys both are fans.
Yeah, this was a unanimous. I went back and checked the record, the history. It was a unanimous 14-0 vote.
Really?
I think it might have been the first ever unanimous vote on anything.
Yeah, it was fun.
Oh, we've had buy-in raises that have had to be unanimous, right? So.
True. This is the first that. Yeah, it was fantastic, and kudos to Peskin for making it even better by the board and so on. I think it's I love it.
Yeah, the introduction of the logos and the board last year to go along with toppers, I think, went a long way. It was just everyone was like, "Oh, this is freaking awesome!" And I think everyone likes that additional dynamic anyway. It's kind of an extra strategic thing that you can build into your draft, which is good.
Yeah, my only regret was using it on Chris Dunn for $23. I could think of another way I could spend those $23. That's slightly better.
There wasn't many toppers on cheaper guys last year. Is that right? If I recall correctly, on cheaper flyers like Chris Dunn's.
I think that's probably right.
Is there going to be a shift this year?
Simmons was a topper. There's a few rookies. I think I need to add it to the sheet. There was a request to add in who got topped.
Yeah, I mean,
it was
Harden, there was Paul, there was Simmons, there was Dunn. Marc Gasol, I think, was Gabe's topper. I think Batum was Amisha's topper.
Valanciunas.
You gave Weeg and I both top Valanciunas.
Yeah.
Nerlens was tops.
That's embarrassing to say that you and I both top JV.
I know that was just awful. Just so bad.
Yeah, that sounds like almost. I'm curious this year to see if that changes a little bit. It was kind of like an exploratory year, and now I feel like people may be trying to look at angles that didn't happen last year and doing something a little different. So it'll be fun. I haven't even thought about it. Have you guys thought about it at all?
No.
For this year?
I've known who I'm gonna top for 6 months now.
Wow, I like it.
Yeah.
Very cool. Any guesses, Height, who that is? Give me one guess.
I have no idea. I would say maybe one of the rookies, like Tatum or somebody not in the UAFBDL.
That would be too lucky if he nailed one of the guys that didn't get UAFBDL'd.
Yeah, I didn't have that much foresight 6 months ago.
Yeah, can that be a new verb when you're excited about
ago.
a guy and he gets UAFBDL'd? So now nobody can touch him for 3 years to come.
Yeah, like Zion Williamson, T-Mac locking him up for the next 3 years.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Anyways, so the next piece of the rules changes are those rules that did not pass. So let's start with the easier ones. The Lone Star League name change. How do you guys feel about that?
I mean, I think this one has to be done by the people and not like legislatively, so to speak. I think if people just start naming it the Lone Star League, then it becomes the Lone Star League. Regardless of what it says in the legislation, which is UAFBDL. But I think the vote was to change it actually in the Constitution, which is unnecessary. Like if everybody just starts calling it the Lone Star League, then it will become the Lone Star League. So I think I voted for it, but it hasn't really taken off, and that may be because the Collier Pod members don't use it. If the media started picking up on it, then I think that would go a long way.
Yeah, I agree. UAFBDL is a mouthful. I would like something a little easier to say.
Yeah, D League, G League, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the few things that I have zero opinion on. It doesn't happen often. I couldn't care less. I don't know what you guys call it.
So moving on, the IL spot.
Yeah, this was one that I brought up as well. This was a new feature because it was a new feature that was added. I think we might have talked about it on the last Rogue pod. But the feature of being able to add an IL spot in the first place, which was voted on and we added before I think the start of last season. But then the new feature that was added kind of mid-season was the ability to pick somebody up directly into the IL spot. So if somebody's hurt and on waivers, you can place your bid and add them directly to the spot without having to drop anybody, as long as you don't, currently have somebody in that spot. I thought this was also uncontroversial, but apparently some people really did not like this one, and it did not get approved.
Yeah, I think Jones and I were the biggest proponents against it. And my argument, I don't know if it's a very strong argument. My argument was more just I didn't want it to end up just turning into this 17th roster spot where people were stashing, players. Like, to me, the IL was, basically an injury exception, right? So one of your starters gets hurt, or one of your, guys that you were relying on gets hurt, for the period of time that he's hurt, you have the opportunity to pick up somebody else. I didn't want it to just become this, revolving IL swap, if you will. I like the idea that if you're moving a guy off of your IL back into your starting lineup, you have to cut someone, right? Because that's what you'd have to do in the NBA, right? You'd have to waive someone.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I voted for it, but I completely appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I see. I didn't feel strongly either way. I just didn't think it was controversial.
Yeah.
But you still have to place a bid on the guy, right? So you're still, it's not just like a free ad. Other people.
Yeah, that's true. That's true because of the new free agent system, which I fucking hate. But
you hate? That's interesting. That could be
I fucking hate the free agent.
Why do you liked when it was just free agent? You could pick somebody up without having to place a bid.
Yes.
Do you hate it because of the real spirit of it, or because it lessens a strength that you used to have?
More
Or
so
both?
the latter than the former, of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, to me, the strength for me wasn't like being quicker to grab an injury replacement. To me, like when I was successful in the waiver wire, and I wasn't last year, because of the free agent bidding process. Like what I would do is I would scroll through game logs and I would be like, okay, you know what, this guy is starting against this team. I might be able to get a good game out of him. You know, and I would pick them up, and I'd have the freedom to be able to do that. And now I have to wait until he plays the game that evening, and if he happens to actually have a good game, which is what, if I happen to be right and predicted it correctly, now I've got 5 other guys that are putting in dollar bids, $3 bids, or whatever. Like I must have lost out on guys the most out of any manager last year, which is just incredibly frustrating. Now 80% of those guys are useless and don't actually make a difference, but
back to our previous point.
Yeah.
Yeah, at some point I did put together the numbers of how many times people were in bidding and lost, and I think it was like you, and I believe it was Emmer was way up there too, just losing out on guys constantly with low bids. He had a huge number, I believe.
And I'm gonna blame you for this hype, because I don't understand why we can't have a unlocked free agent period for like just right up until game time. Like I'd be perfectly fine with that. Like if we could pick up guys like between 3 and 7 o'clock without any issues, and
you'd
then
unlock it at 3 though, instead of, so in the previous system it would it would be unlocked at like midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. is when guys went from waivers to free agents.
Just some period of time where it is a free for all, that hopefully doesn't coincide with news coming out, or the previous night's games or something like that. I just and obviously the league would have to vote on this. I probably wouldn't pass now because everyone likes the free agent system, because it handcuffs the shit out of me and Horn.
Yeah, I didn't realize that you felt so strongly against it. I thought it was kind of like a known thing. I like it.
Can't stand it.
Can you also, I guess, will you learn to appreciate the gamesmanship of the blind bidding? Because that's kind of fun, right? Like there's guys where there's going to be 5 others in there with you, and I think there's some entertainment value in the gamesmanship of deciding what to put as a bid.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's certainly fun. It's just a lot more work. I really like if I knew a guy was going to have a good night, I'd rather would have just been able to pick him up before the game. Now I have to wait until after the game and scroll through every single box score and figure out the 8 guys that had good nights that happen to be on the waiver wire, and which of the other 13 managers might put in a bid on any of those 8 guys, and then prioritize those bids based on. So like it's more dynamic than that to me, right? It's not just, oh, this guy's going to go for 15 and this guy's going to go for 10. It's like, well, my waiver priority is based on the dollar amount, right? Mm-hmm. So that throws a kink into things. Like if I could change the waiver priority and like I wanted to bid $3, but I would make that my first claim, as opposed to bidding $15 on another guy who I think is going to go for 20. But if he doesn't go for 20, I'll take him at 15. Like that would be an additional nuance that I would actually love. But you don't get the option, right? It's whatever your top dollar bid becomes your first claim. So.
Yep. All right. I think the last one that didn't pass was the buy-in. Any strong feelings either way from you two against that?
I mean, this was probably the most controversial, right? I fully supported it. I've always fully supported it. I basically have said all along I'd buy in for as much as anybody wants to buy in for. I can't imagine in like 10 or 20 years we're still having the same buy-in. Like, I don't know, maybe that's what some people want, is to not have it like change anything. But at the same time, people are suggesting all sorts of rules that are going to try to change like all sorts of dynamics of the league. That increasing the buy-in seems like a minor one compared to some of the other changes that have been proposed.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a camp of probably, 6 guys that are like, we'll buy in for whatever the buy-in is, and I'm in that camp with Height as well. I spend so much time on this, I really don't care. Put whatever price tag you want on it. When you break it down and by hours spent, it's I'm getting paid what a medical intern gets paid for it. So.
I'm definitely in that camp, but I'm also sympathetic with the other, which is I don't personally. It wouldn't matter if the league was free or any amount of money. I think I would put the same general effort into it because it's more about the fun of it, right?
Yeah.
So
I don't think I would raise the buy-in to try to like improve or increase the tanking down the stretch or anything like that. Like trying to solve what some of the other proposals have tried to solve. Like I think it would just increase the buy-in for the sake of basically for the sake of it, because we spend so much time
just gambling fun, right?
Yeah. And we make, we all are doing better than we were doing, 10 years ago when we started this.
Agreed. I
yeah,
agree.
I mean, I've had this discussion with Horn because I think he's one of the proponents against raising the buy-in, and he makes a relevant point that he believes that part of the reason why we've been such a successful league, why we've run so smoothly, is that there's no contention around there's no contention around money, right?
Yeah.
Like the buy-in is so low, we don't really care about it. So everyone acts kind of in the best interest of the league because it's not this desire to make another $1,000 or a few $100s. And I think his concern is if you change that dynamic, it potentially changes the behavior that we've been lucky enough to have for the last decade. I don't necessarily buy into that simply because, how many of us does $500 actually matter?
Right.
We're all in our mid-30s and we're all it at least sounds like we're all successfully, on successful career paths, right? Like $500, $1,000, like that's just fucking doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, we could all work that in. And what would happen? Like, is there going to be like wrestling matches at the ranch over $1?
Right. Like I just don't see even over $1,000. Like I think we're all getting enough friends that like it doesn't matter. Like
Yeah, I think his argument was more like, so we can still do handshake deals, and when it comes down to the buy-in being bigger, what's the do the odds change of a manager honoring a handshake deal or kind of acting with full integrity? You could argue that the Buddy Hield thing would have been a bigger deal if we had $1,000 buy-in, or Horn not dropping a player for 3 months, would have been more people would have thrown their arms up in the air about it if it was a bigger buy-in. So,
and I don't want to do that. I liked this sort of. I think Books introduced this idea of, I'm most sensitive to like maybe there is one day where somebody just doesn't or can't put $1,000 in for that year. They don't want to, or for whatever their own financial reason. There'd be like a backdoor way through Books to handle that situation, right? That's the only thing that at all gives me pause about raising, is just making sure everybody's comfortable. No one's like, oh shit, I got to figure out how to budget for this, and I really don't want to this year,
Yeah.
No, that's definitely a fair point. I'm making this assumption that the money doesn't matter to everyone, but I don't think that's a fair assumption for me to make.
Or it's probably generally fair, but is it going to be fair forever and always? And I wouldn't want to put somebody in that spot. So I'm just thinking like down the road, it's a pretty simple way to just build in a backdoor for that privately so anybody can deal with it, right? And I don't think the league at all would care if it was like, okay, well then we'll spread the rest out amongst the rest, or whatever for that year. So
yeah, we'll just reduce the payouts by the amount that.
I don't think anyone would blink an eye to that. But yeah, I'm with you.
I would like to applaud Rumspringa, Amish, on his valiant effort at trying to pass this, though. He did spend a lot of time on the proposal and the ballot proposal and initiative.
Agreed. He was whipping
while he was competing, no less.
While he was competing, that's right. I don't know that he's going to have the energy or anybody's going to have the energy to do it again. So we could be at this buy-in for a while.
All right. The last piece is one that Height loves because he gets to update the franchise record, is our Dynasty Awards that nobody.
Yeah, so that one. So I added this. This one passed like a while back. I
Yeah.
think this was just more of a general thing that I wanted to bring up, is that we've added these things to the league. There was a lot more proposals this year that didn't pass. And we've almost like forgotten like the dynasty thing. I don't know that anybody really remembered that was happening, or what the rules are, or what the winner gets. It turns out that I forget even who won last year. It was the first one. I think gets free food, or gets the food and drink paid for at the ranch, which means I have to go in and figure out how to track that, which should be fun. In general, I would say that a lot of these kind of new suggestions or new proposals, when they used to be brought up, Books was the first one. Books' response in general has always been like, oh, how can we track that? That's going to be impossible to track. And my response was always, well, I'm the one doing it for the most part. If it's better for the league, then I'm all for it, and we'll figure out like the logistics or the tracking later. But I do think it's getting to a point where it may become a problem, especially if we add in some of the newer proposals that have been talked about this past year.
Yeah. I like the dynasty stuff. I think it's fun to like look back and see who's steady and so on. And I do think it is a little bit of an incentive to the age-old argument of people tanking at the end and just not paying a bit of attention, right? Like, I had a blast last year fighting and clawing at the end, even though I had already sold off to Amish. And
can't believe you freaking tied me for 5th place.
Yeah, that's crazy. That was hard work.
That was hard work.
And it was fun. I think I had more fun than I had anticipated clawing my way up from I was in like 13th at one point, I think. And
the thing that I think frustrated me the most was that you made like these huge moves in like the last 3 weeks, and meanwhile I had been spending like 2.5 months clawing for like 2 or 3 points, and then all of a sudden I'm like, we just went from like 48 to 5th or whatever it was. Like you just shot up like 10 points in 3 weeks, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so fucking annoying.
Yeah,
and you kept on starting blocks, guys, and so I couldn't get that point from you. Very frustrating.
We had fun conversations at the end there about
we did.
What
we
we
did.
What
I was trying to talk you out of starting JaVale McGee.
Yeah, that was some fun gamesmanship.
Another waiver wire issue, because we both bid on JaVale McGee the same exact fucking price, and you got him because of your waiver priority.
And that could have given you 5th place all alone. Yeah, that was fun. I got lucky not lucky actually in my viewpoint, but I mean I think like Towns and Butler were top. I don't remember. I have to go back and look, but I want to say in the last month or two they were like top 5 guys, and Towns they were huge.
Towns was just unreal, and like right after LaVine got hurt, Towns just fucking went off. He was I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't the number 1 player for a period of time.
Yeah. Speaking of, just to dovetail what they were talking about in the pod, is how do you guys, asking selfishly, view Butler and Towns both on the Wolves this year? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Am I screwed? Is Butler really going to take the hit I don't want him to?
I mean, I think they'll be fine. It really depends on how much usage Wiggins will kind of whether or not he'll take another step in usage and become like a 30-point scorer, or whether he's going to kind of whether he's going to plateau. I think Teague will end up kind of being a spot up guy. They'll put the ball in Butler's hands, and they'll try and run the offense through to Butler and Towns. And if Thibodeau is smart, he'll end up staggering Wiggins and giving Wiggins time against like second teamers, so he can just kind of be almost like a 6-man and just score the shit out of the ball. Because he doesn't do anything else well.
That makes sense. That's why I got my fingers crossed. I think he might throw a wrench and
Yeah,
everything else.
Selfishly, I'm more worried about the Paul George and getting along with Westbrook and what happens down there.
Yeah, that's harder, I think, to understand what's going to happen. All right.
I mean, I wouldn't be that worried if I were you, Height. I mean, Westbrook and KD were fine when they were together, and George isn't KD, but they certainly there's certainly enough room on that team for two guys to put up top 10 value.
Yeah, it certainly seems like if anything, it's Westbrook who's going to be knocked down a notch, right? Somebody said, I think it was Gabe said something funny in the pod. It's like instead of being like the entire Eastern Seaboard nuclear, he's just Philly nuclear.
Yeah, I mean, it might be great for Westbrook. I mean, if his turnovers go down from like 6 a game to like 4.5, and his field goal goes from like being this massive sinkhole to like 44% or something like that, he's going to be amazing. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, the rest of that team is Steven Adams, Andre Roberson. Like, it's fucking terrible. Like, there's nobody else on that team.
Yeah, agreed. All right, let's. One of the things we had hoped to talk about a little bit is more of the Collier pod centric. I think we're here because we love the Collier pod and everything about it. This isn't really something that runs in parallel to that. It's more of a nod to the pod and just something fun that we pop in from time to time to do. I love the pod. So from that perspective, what do you guys want to see more of, less of? Like, how can we help? I mean, the pod's already great. It's hard to even improve it a little bit. But if you had some things to say you want to see out of it over season 3, what are those things?
Well, for me, I guess it's not necessarily. I wouldn't necessarily want them to cover it, but when they brought me on as a guest, one of the most fun parts for me was Horn tasked me with kind of reliving the story of the Keep Show. Like, how did we get to where we are now with with my 8 slots and a bunch of shitty fucking keepers? Mm-hmm. And sorry, I curse a lot. I'm realizing this as I'm talking.
You mean to put a disclaimer on the iTunes stuff?
And like I actually, like, I sat down at work that day and I went through like the Yahoo history and the franchise record and like there are things that I had forgotten happened that kind of clicked back in my memory. I'm like, oh, that's what happened with my team. And so that was a lot of fun for me, just personally doing that. And I almost think, like, if they had a 15 or 20 minute pod with each manager covering like history of their team, it would be kind of cool for us all to hear about. But that's more kind of on a personal thing. I don't necessarily think they need to do it, but that was a lot of fun for me.
No, I mean, I think I agree. Like, more of the UAFBL stuff and less of like the general basketball. I think we all listen to basketball analysis and podcasts and other media. Not that I don't, appreciate what Lusky has to say on certain players, and it's interesting to see who he's trying to pimp generally and push his own agenda. But I think the more fun stuff is talking about like the UAFBL history and teams and dynamics.
Yeah, I completely agree. Part of the fun in listening to the pod is hearing those, kind of like you said, Phil, how you got to run through your viewpoint leading up to something. Part of the fun is hearing that same thing echoed in the things they're talking about, right? Like hearing how Lusky's prepping or how he got to hear what he's thinking strategically, and the same with the other guys, I think is pretty fantastic. It's like the unique perspective of each of the different managers and how they've gotten to where they are, what they're doing, or even what they're strategizing in the future is pretty fun. So another perspective is more coverage on, rules, potential impacts, things like that, things that we all think about kind of as we're prepping on a day-to-day. I love that stuff where it's just, where are the slots right now? What is UAFBDL doing to the league? What impacts can it have on the draft? Things like that, I think, are fantastic. And honestly, those three guys that are on the pod are probably three of the best managers too. So to hear what they have to say is often insightful, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree on everything about the three best managers piece, at least.
I'm just trying to keep things nice. You know, we're not a battling podcast. Remember, we're just
complimentary in more ways than one.
Exactly right. I just, that kind of strategy stuff. I remember, oh man, when I first joined the league, I was actually, long story short, I was living in my parents' basement again. And I was a contractor with a cake job. And I would sit on chat and like just pick Horn's brain on how to play NBA fantasy basketball and how to play it well. In a way, I'm a student. I come out of the David Horn apprenticeship camp. And it was so fun. I loved it. I appreciate so much all the insight he was willing to share and give and so on. And it's the same. I still feel like a newbie so often compared to a lot of you guys. So any kind of stuff like that on the pod, I eat up. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say is that it's hard, right? And it's a little bit unfair because they are constantly kind of doing the pod for them to kind of lay out their thoughts and strategies. So I understand, why it wouldn't be as prevalent, kind of, as a topic on the pod, because, no one wants to, what they're doing or how they think they can take advantage of, of a scenario. Like, I mean, the why I didn't delve into, the trade details is because I personally think that I've come up with a couple of new unique things that I've offered out to some managers that, are not your typical trades, not things that we've seen before. And I certainly don't want to kind of share that with the other 13 managers and kind of have them jump on my bandwagon and kind of lose the edge that I would get from it. So
completely agree there. And well, in a way, I can't be sure, but I don't know about you guys, but there's often times in the pod where I sense some gamesmanship even in the strategy that's being discussed. It's a game within a game, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so they could get away with more, I think, even from that perspective. And I get it completely.
I mean, everything that comes out of Lusky's mouth is gamesmanship, right? Like, what if I told you could have?
Yep, everything is just a pitch to sell Brook Lopez, right? That's all it is. So I like it. What was I going to say on top of that is that I don't remember. That's all right. What else? What other things do you guys love or hate about the pod?
Not about the pod.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? Just in general, the Slack discussion. I don't know that they've talked about it really on the pod yet.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I think Slack has been great for the league.
Oh, yeah.
The one negative is the lack of history. So I don't know if we want to discuss like paying for it. I forgot how much it cost. I think it was not cheap. Because it's again not meant for this use. I think we're using it in a way that probably not intended. But not having the search and the history has been a problem, I would say, or will become a problem, especially moving forward.
Yeah, especially since a lot of our conversations used to, I feel like, take a place over GChat, and you would be able to kind of search. Right. Now a lot of the conversations take place over Slack and without that search functionality. But I think it was something like $40 a month or something, which is not cheap. I mean, talking about $500 a year for us to communicate on an app.
It's okay by me. That's one of my own personal angles is I actually record all the predictions and insight people give me and then go back and review it to see who's constantly wrong. And you guys would be surprised who the real prognosticators of UAFBL are.
Really? Could you what data do you have to share with us?
I told you that's one of my angles. I can't share that.
You can't share that. Okay, fair enough.
But it's fun. I love that in life. I want to build like some kind of app that just records people's predictions in all things, and then allows us to fact check them later. Be like, hey, remember 6 months ago when you said this was going to happen because of this, whatever, politics, what have you? And because people never remember, people just say all sorts of craziness, and then nobody ever holds them accountable. Drives me crazy. But
Yep. The one thing on Slack that I did want to bring up was apparently, and I haven't talked to Horn directly about this, but apparently he has a version or some kind of issue with the Slack Dads channel. I don't know if either of you have talked to him about this, about
absolutely.
why he refuses to participate. Do either of you guys have any insight there?
Yeah, I think he said something to the tune. Well, he didn't say it to me, but someone shared. Oh, didn't someone
It was
just have dinner
Bookbinder.
with him?
Bookbinder shared it on that Dad's channel because he was happy that there was finally a channel where it wasn't like a minus Bookbinder channel. He was like, it's a minus Orange channel. And I guess Bookbinder had spoken to him, and Horn's opinion was that he goes onto Slack to talk about, you know, fantasy and to get away from life. And
But that's not true.
Is about
we have a TV channel. Like, I feel like there's some soccer talk. Like, it's definitely not just basketball or UAFBL that's discussed on Slack.
Agreed. I'm pretty sure there's a Hodor channel that I'm pretty sure Horn's been on.
I didn't even know that one.
There's a Hodor channel, really?
I need to do that.
Yeah,
so right now.
I'm with you there. I would urge,
maybe he'll address it on the next Collier pod. Now that you know we put it out there, maybe he'll defend himself in the next Collier pod.
I'm certainly not afraid to call. I know Horn deep down is a soft-hearted, wonderful, beautiful father. So, dare I say, he reminds me a little bit of like these old white Republicans I meet that can't, you know, talk plainly about their emotions or talk about parenting or their children or anything like that. You know, like
an old white Republican.
I am. I'm calling them out right there. Like, it's okay to talk about parenting. This is a new world where dads parent and we care about it. And we like
to know, like, if Rumspringa is using the cried out method or not. You know, like, these are things that I need to know in my life.
I do too. I like it. I'm not afraid. I'm not ashamed to care about parenting. So Horn, this is our plea to you. Join the Dad's channel, please, and give us your perspective on all things parenting. All right. Well, I don't know. You guys got anything else you want to touch on? It's been a while. We've been going, so I know it's late. Phil, we really appreciate you staying up late on the East Coast there.
No worries.
I mean, draft's coming up.
How long have we been going?
A little over an hour, I think.
Oh, okay. So we'll get edited down to like 45 minutes or something. That's not bad.
Yeah, Peskin is a wonderful editor. So, anything else? Yeah, we got the draft coming up. Any thoughts?
Or so early draft, early season this year. I feel like the flight bookings are going to start soon, which is always like a great part of summer or end of summer when people start booking their flights and thinking about the trip.
Oh yeah, wow,
which is exciting.
It's only 3 months away. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Wow, that's actually kind of great. That is amazing.
Yeah,
it does feel good, and it means we're that much closer to like some of these trade discussions becoming reality.
Yes, this is true. Training camp will start. When does training camp start? Like September 1st?
Right.
Yeah, it's got to be early September.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I think there's going to be some fun action trade-wise. At first, I thought there wasn't going to be, but then I started to look around and do some real research, and I think there'll be some fun deals that go down in the offseason here.
Yeah, I mean, the trend last year was kind of new in some of the really big dollar amounts being thrown around before the draft. Mm-hmm. And so it'd be interesting to see like the Jokic and was it Porzingis deals. Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting to see if those continue.
Porzingis effectively got sold for like $160. It was insane.
Yeah, that was crazy. And
it's going to be the same this year because we have 3 managers with very little in assets and very little,
Right, but Lusky doesn't rebuild, right? Or
That's right.
he doesn't tank.
Lusky
He's gonna
rebuilds through
compete.
competing. This is correct.
Right. And do you think anyone's put off by the fact that ultimately Books came in with his huge stack that was kind of unprecedented, right? And still fell short.
No.
No, I think everyone loves that. No, I mean, I feel bad for Books, but I think everyone loves that.
Right. I guess my question was, is anyone to be turned off seeing that Books wasn't able to be successful with that method?
I don't think so. I think that was a pretty good position, and yeah.
Who are the Porzingis and Jokic guys of this year? Are there any?
The new ones? I mean, they're still the guys of this year. I don't know if they're new ones.
I don't know that there are new ones. I mean, I guess you can make an argument for Porter. I'm not a Porter believer, so I won't make that argument. But yeah.
And he's already under contract. Or no, he's not under contract.
No. Porter will be a brand new contract.
Yeah.
Right.
None of the guys on my team, at least that I would point to. So.
No, same here. Or none. Maybe there are some, but nobody's going to be tempted to deal them for cash, right? There's all the rest of the guys are farther up the chain that they're providing enough value, I think, right? Their value isn't locked up in future potential as much as like Porzingis was,
right?
Which still remains to be.
Yeah, true. And I think to your point about bookbinders, I think it will scare people off. I mentioned when I was on the pod with Lusky and Horn, earlier or during the season last year, that I didn't think it was the right thing to do because Lusky won the league because he had 2 multi-year keepers or maybe even 3 multi-year keepers that he was able to deal away for chips when the time came. Mm-hmm. And Bookbinder had kind of handcuffed himself by dealing Jokic and Embiid before the draft.
Yeah, you almost.
So he had Whiteside, but
yeah. You almost have to have at least one chip to win, right? There's almost no way around it.
Yeah, I mean, Amis did 2 separate deals with Butler and Giannis, and then he spent the rest of his cash on Cousins, and then Lusky did the Draymond deal and the Westbrook deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there were other deals in there as well. I'm likely forgetting something.
Yep. Well, I'll put this out here right now, mid-season, when I'm making my run. You can knock on my door for Karl Anthony Towns. He's got a year left.
But not cheap.
But not cheap. I mean, he's amazing. He's the number 1 player. He'll be the number 1 player this year, so he's kind of cheap.
Either him or Paul Zipser. I don't know which one it's going to be better.
Paul Zipser. Georgios Papagiannis. Yeah.
I just need Bagley to declare for college this year. That'd be freaking amazing. Just free money.
Wait, what is the deal? What is the deal with him?
So he's had a bunch of he's the number 1 recruit in the 2018 class. He's had a bunch of he skipped around a lot of schools, mainly because his dad's a fucking dickhead and his dad takes him wherever he goes to try and get jobs. But he's really good in school. He's academically, he's a really smart kid. And I think he has done well enough in school that he could potentially fast track and actually declare he's graduated from high school and attend college. So if he's able to do that, I think there was one guy at Duke that did that this year too. He joined Duke in January. And so if he's able to do that, he changes potentially the college landscape and becomes draft eligible for the 2018 draft, which the predictions are that he would have been the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft if he had come out.
Yeah, and he'll automatically kind of be slotted in at the number 1 spot in 2018.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So you move Porter down and you move Ayton down basically. Which is actually probably a good thing because their contract prices will be less. But gamesmanship here from my perspective, obviously, if Bagley comes out next year, my pick ends up looking great because I didn't have to wait 2 years, I only had to wait 1. and the talk is that he's the best prospect in the last 10 years, which would include guys that have come out in the last 10 years like Davis and Anthony Towns, and like we're going back to like LeBron James at this point, and we're talking about the best prospect in the last 10 years.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Gamesmanship.
Phil, how good is Willie Hernangomez going to be in the Knicks this year?
It depends on how good the Knicks are going to be, which is terrible.
Shit.
So I mean, I could see the Knicks losing games like 90-65. And there's just not enough stats to be had when your team scores 65 points.
Is there any chance he can just go like 6 for 7 every night with a block and a half and a steal and shoot well from the line?
I mean, there's certainly a chance. That I think their plan is to play him at the 5, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, because they don't want to move Porzingis to the 5, so they're gonna run Porzingis and Hernangomez, and if Porzingis is playing outside more as a perimeter player, like a stretch 4, then Hernangomez will theoretically get the boards if he happens to be starting. I don't know what Hornacek's plans are. Yeah.
All right. Well, I am accepting offers. Actually, I'm gonna just keep him, lock him up, and he's gonna be my chip this year. I think that's how it's gonna go.
There you go.
All right. Any other? Anybody else want to puff up any other guys, a la Lusky on the pod here while we got time?
I mean, I think Zipzer speaks for himself. I don't really need to talk him up anymore. Then he's already been mentioned.
Yeah, what is Hyde? What's with all the Bulls you have?
Well, it wasn't. I mean, the trade kind of went down that route. That wasn't intentional. Chris Dunn was not a Bull when I drafted.
Oh, that's true. Oh, and Levine wasn't a Bull either.
And
that's
Levine.
Right. You had Dunn and Levine.
Right.
Oh my
Levine's
god.
available for anybody who wants it for 2 more years. It's a cheap investment for when he comes back.
I think
for anyone. Yeah.
I think every single summer league recap I read starts with like the 3 Bulls who are complete garbage in summer league, and it's always those 3.
Like, so I mean, we're probably at the part of the pod where this will get edited out, but I mean, it's curious to me how the story on Dunn has changed so quickly. I mean, I get that he didn't have a successful season, but I mean, he never really got an opportunity to start. I mean, Rubio was amazing for the T-Wolves. I mean,
Rubio was
averaged
early
like 32.
on. Early
on, sure, yeah. But I mean, those were the first NBA games that Chris Dunn had ever played. You can't expect him to, be that NBA ready and step in and become, like be a stud just because Rubio is out for like 10 games.
He is like 22 or 23 or something, right? Chris Dunn.
Oh, I guess he's older. That's right, because he played like 3 or 4 years in college, right?
So even though he was a rookie, I think people were expecting him to come in and just because he's older and be able to contribute. And with Rubio out early on, he had the opportunity, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah, because I mean the narrative. I mean, it's gone from like, oh my God, Chris Dunn is the best player in this draft, to oh my God, Chris Dunn is the biggest bust of this draft. And it's, I mean, in less than a year, it's crazy to me. I mean, it's not like he's lost all of his talent or his ability to play basketball.
I'm sure like Emmer is going to get him for like $2 this year, and then he's going to be kept for 3 years after that.
I was gonna say, that same narrative happened in UAFBL. I remember last year everyone was talking up Dunn like crazy, and now it's nothing. It's a horrible contract.
He got top for $23.
Yeah.
I loved it at the time. I thought that was great. I thought it was amazing.
Sorry, Height.
Yeah.
That was tough luck for you. All right, gentlemen.
What happens with Ben Simmons? I mean, what's going to happen with Ben Simmons?
What's his price? Like $40, $50?
50.
Well, there's no way he's getting kept. I mean, he was like 57, right?
50 on the dot.
50 on the dot, so it'd be 60. Yeah. Oh, maybe he is getting kept. I don't know.
Why wouldn't
I can't.
He would have to be like Jones. They knew he wasn't going to play. Both him and whoever else topped it.
It was Jones and Peskin. Well, no, the news hadn't come out yet that he was going to get shut down for the season. He had broken his foot and he was going to be like out for 3 or 4 months. But there was a rumor. There was a rumor that he might not play, that he might be shut down for the season. They didn't actually shut him down, I think, until like December or something like that.
Yep.
I don't know. It seems like he'll be kept just because of that investment. Like, I don't know, sunk cost, but like I feel like at that time they were doing that to keep him. And I don't know.
guess so,
I doubt he'll be valued. I don't see that him returning the value, but I still think he'll be kept probably.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
It's tough. 3. So, and I mean, you're not keeping him on a 1-year contract, right? He's 3 years.
Yeah, that's a big risk. $90 or $90 and $80 in 3 years.
Yeah, it's a big bet to be saddled with too. You're hurting if that doesn't pan out, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, especially it'd be one thing if we had seen him play already, you know. But
saw him playing Summer League. He was mediocre.
Yeah. Summer League doesn't mean shit. We all know that, right? I share Peskin's perspective on Summer League. Doesn't matter if you're good or bad, right? It's the same thing. I really liked on the pod there. I think it was Horn unveiled the top 10 Summer League guys from last year. So that kind of put it in perspective.
Yeah, I mean, from a statistical perspective, you're right. I think that numbers are flawed, and it's tough to rely on the numbers. I think it's fun watching them. Like I watched Lonzo Ball for 2 games, and I'm like, oh my god, this guy pushes the ball every single fucking time he has it. I mean, if he does that in NBA, it'll probably result in good things. A lot of turnovers also, but but theoretically good things.
It's the eye test.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I'm with you. All right. I feel good about the pod. I had fun. You guys got anything else to add?
No, man. Thanks for setting it up.
No, absolutely. Phil, as always, you're amazing to listen to. I wish they'd have you on the pod every night. And, once again, thanks so much to those 3 guys in the Collier pod. We love it. The league loves it. I think it's really one of the coolest things I mean, there's so many cool things to talk about with this league, and when people get me going about it that are outsiders, they're just like borderline absolutely shocked that this really exists, or they think I'm lying. This really goes on, and then I throw on, and these 3 guys put out a regular podcast all the time. They're like, what? No, they don't. I'm like, yeah, they do. So
next time we'll get Glaspie for sure as the guest.
We're working on it. Height and I are just working on it day in, day out. We have a regular marketing campaign going to him.
On the phones.
Yeah.
I mean, I selfishly push for this podcast because it feels cool to me to be the only special guest on both the Collier pod and the Rogue pod. So
that's true. You are the only ones who have been on both.
That's right.
Absolutely. My new angle of Glaspie is I'm going to ask him when the next time he's going to be drunk is, and if he can just call in for like 10 minutes, we'll just get a short spot from him. We'll have the questions, like a rapid fire session with drunk Glaspie.
Just call me on the spot. Whatever I'm doing, I'll just join and we can do it.
Exactly.
That'd be funny.
We'll plan like a long pod around that whole night. We'll just go, and then we'll toss to Peskin for editing.
Awesome.
All right, guys. Good stuff. Thanks again. Thanks to the pod. And we'll talk to you guys next time.
All right. Thanks.
Later, man.
Later.
Bye.